Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back with Riot Kent. The final patch of the Dragonlands, the first half of the set before we head into the mid-set expansion. And here we are, we did it. Patch 1216 rundown.
Last patch before we go to PvE.
Yeah. This is always the patch where it's like we're still definitely trying to like show that we still care about the live game, we're not ignoring it, make a few changes, but also make a few changes that set us up for a good spot in the mid-set. Whether it be things that change or give things their last hurrah. I'm not going to tell you which is which because it's Sunday and there's no info I'm allowed to talk about yet. But, that's kind of what we're doing here with this patch. It's just sort of that last kind of hurrah with Dragonlands. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as you'll see, it's going to be a pretty small patch. We the meta has settled mostly. We're going to like try to enable more things by opening up, whether it's like by nerfing the top or like buffing the bottom. But we're going to try to like just nudge things into the right place. No big swings, no big changes or anything like that. And overall, like a pretty small patch.
Yep. Cool. Let's dive into it. Last one. All right. Bruiser. Bruiser 6 and 8 just really haven't been worth it, whether you're running Siphon or just for the fun of chasing 6 and 8 Bruiser. So we're going to buff 6 and 8 Bruiser to let you hit those higher chases and have fun with that.
Yep, nothing else to add on this one.
Cool. Cavalier, we talked about, we nerfed this last patch. It's still really good. It's still the best frontline by a significant margin. We're going to nerf it again. This is also going to act as a secondary nerf to the Cavalier Volibear comp. So, yeah, just a little bit of a nerf there. The defenses are really, really high, and so just bringing that down a little bit. Another nudge.
Yeah, we talked about it in the post-mortem, but basically, like, we're taking the philosophy of like small nudges constantly rather than like any big kind of swings. And so last patch we did a small nudge. It didn't really change anything, which is good, but they're still too strong, so we're nudging them a little bit further down. They should still be really good. That's the goal, but like they will be less dominant than they are right now.
Yep. Trainer, as we talked about, Trainer 3 ended up a little too strong. Just very slight nerf at Nomsy 2, but then bigger nerfs at Nomsy 3 and 4, losing, just a little bit over 10% of the damage on that fireball. We still want Nomsy 3 and 4 to be those tanky, high health champions. I think this will still make Trainer good. It just doesn't need to be doing quite so much damage for free.
Yeah, I think this should still keep Namzi carry as like a viable thing. You can, well, not not full carry, but like second, like having two duo carries. One of them is Namzi should completely still be viable. Just less dominant than
Yep.
it is.
Tempest 6 and 8. This shouldn't be surprising, but still not seeing a lot of people run 6 and 8. Maybe there's some number here will make that okay. That'll be worth it. I think the lightning strike actually does plenty of damage, but that buff afterwards, we just really want that to be exciting, especially if you hit that 8 Tempest trait.
Yeah, the comp is just really hard to play. It's kind of awkward, and so like the number at the end, at the high end, has to be like really high to bribe players to be like, this is a lot of power. If you want to go for it, go for it. And if you have the right scenarios, this could actually work out. But it's going to be like this number went up a lot basically. So
Yep.
it'll be really strong, but still has its issues of like you need the right scenarios, and this is kind of awkward to play and all that stuff. So
Yep. All right, Ezreal. We want to try to enable Ezreal a little bit more here, get him casting a little bit more often. We still want Ezreal to be kind of that premier one cost AP carry, Ezreal and Karma. Just not quite living up to that. It takes him a little too long to ramp up, so we're buffing the attack speed. But we also don't want him, because when he ramps up his attack speed, he has very high attack speed. We really don't want him being like the Deathblade user or the Hurricane user or stuff like that. So this is hopefully going to buff Ezreal and keep him much more AP focused.
yeah, this will be good for him when you build AP to focus on his mystic shots, or if you just build, the static Shiv Rageblade build. This just is a straight up, it's just going to be better because he's going to proc those a lot more, and his AD doesn't matter as much in those builds. So yeah,
Cool.
as Mort said, it's like this. It looks like an adjustment, mostly a buff though, because it's buffing like the primary uses of his items.
Braum. This change is literally just so Kent can play Assassin Braum on the final patch. There's literally no other reason, right, Kent?
Yeah, Mort was like, when I brought this up to Mort, he's like, he's like, I hate you, but I explained my reasoning. This is like, so
Yeah, it's good
okay, I'll
reasoning.
explain.
It's good reasoning. Go for it.
Leona and Tarek both have 70 AD, around the same attack speed as Braum. They just have way higher DPS than Braum, and so while doing a pass of the Guardians, I was like, Braum needs to go up to 70 AD to match the DPS of those other two Guardians who are lower cost than him. And so
Yep.
we gave Braum a lot of AD. And so this, like as like a side benefit, Rage Blade, Death Blade, Braum might be a viable thing. I'm not saying it's gonna be good. It's gonna be viable. You can play it and you'll have a lot of fun and you'll probably go fourth. But like you'll have fun, so you went first in your heart.
No, it's a good change, and like I said, it makes the consistency with. Usually, we give our tanks higher AD so that they can actually eventually kill things and not just be a stalemate. It's a good change. So,
and yep.
Go ahead.
With Scale Scorn, this also means more magic damage. So let's try it out.
Sure does. Kayn, we buffed him a little bit last patch. It wasn't enough. We're buffing him a little more this patch, so he'll be able to cast a little quicker. Well, like he has to wait the 4 seconds while he's Rage Wing monolocked, but then he can do another cast very quickly afterwards. If you want to go blue buff Kayn, you could, I suppose. I probably shouldn't. And will be a little bit tankier, so he won't fall over just from like the slight breeze that hits the assassins. So
yeah, last patch we gave him some health and some AD. It just wasn't enough. He just wasn't using his spell enough, and so by changing this, it changes his pattern, and then so he'll deal more damage, cast more regularly, be more consistent. If he only hits one unit, he'll kill that unit and move on and start casting on other things. So should make Kayn more viable.
Yep. All right, Diana. Assassins have certainly fallen off, and I don't think anyone's really excited to itemize their Diana, except for, Frozen Heart, which we all love. So giving Diana just a little bit of a buff. She is supposed to be a carry, and so letting her actually do some damage and be a threat to that backline is what we're going for.
Yeah, a decent sized decent sized buff at 2-star, so it should keep you stable for a while. Hopefully this brings Diana like reroll carry as a carry, with itemized AP items like back into the meta. So,
yep. Lee Sin, we talked about it a little bit. We buffed him a little last patch. Just a little buff here so he can cast a little more often. Maybe get that third cast you almost just missed out on if you want to go Dragonmancer Lee Sin. So again, just a little nudge. See if we can make him a little better.
Yeah, with the buffs last patch, he's starting to do like enough damage. Still not really viable much as a carry, just unreliable. But by giving him this faster cycle, you can get more ult off. If he happens to miss a large clump, he can walk up and ult onto that clump again faster than he could have last patch.
Yep. Rise is a champion that can only say so much right now, but basically the pattern is pretty tricky to balance for sure. But right now he's definitely a little weaker than we even want him to, so we don't want to buff his damage from his spell, but we're okay like letting him cast a little bit more often. If you put a Shojin on him, you can get those procs a little bit quicker. So just, again, very slight nudge to Rise to hopefully make him not, D tier kind of level.
Yep, nothing to add.
Cool. And then Xayah. Oh, but Xayah buffs are always scary. She's still underperforming just a little. Now, the big thing we knew we wanted to do is Xayah 1 needs a buff, right? Like, Xayah 1 just doesn't get you there until you really hit the Xayah 2. And we want Xayah 1 to be the kind of thing if you happen to high roll it on 3-1 that, like, you're happy about that. So Xayah 1 gets a little bit of damage on the feathers. And then even with that, we were still finding it wasn't quite enough. So we did the lightest buff possible, the old 5 AD. And so hopefully the combination of these two things put Xayah on, like, Corky's level. And again, you should be happy about getting a Xayah, Swift Shot, Ragewing, Guild, whatever. Get that going and feel pretty good.
And just as a reminder, we did the whole AD system change so that like 75 when she stars up it's 150%, not 180%. So that 580 is actually not as like big of a swing as it used to. I mean, it's a small swing, but it's like not as impactful as it was in older sets. One other thing was just like Xayah 2, we've seen that it's viable if you're like super high rolling, you have a lot of money, you can go 8 and like buy all of the expensive units, and play with Xayah. The Guild Xayah comp is still okay, but it's just so hard to get there. And so like by buffing Xayah 1, if you hit her on like stage 3, you shouldn't be losing. You should be like happy about this. And if you itemize her correctly, you should be doing well. And so we want to make sure that she has enough buffs to like get you to later into the game if you hit an early Xayah.
Cool. All right, I'm just going to do all 3 of these at once. Deja, Shio Yu, and Siphon have certainly been the top of the meta. And it is Dragonlands, and so that kind of makes sense, but not to the level they have been. the fact that it's really hard to replace like your Deja with an A Soul, or just how much of an advantage they can give you at 1 star. So we're bringing all of them down a good chunk, actually. Deja loses 10 armor and MR, so if you can get on Deja, she'll die a little quicker. Also gets a 5 off of her passive damage, so she'll be pumping out a little less damage in between casts. Shio Yu loses quite a bit off the spell damage reduction, so even during the spell won't be quite as tanky, and you'll actually be able to hopefully kill the Shio Yu before it heals up and has that ridiculously high effective health. And then Siphon losing 10 armor and MR as well. Won't be quite as durable. Should make him a little worse of a tank than Itis. And also 10 AD, which isn't as big a deal. The biggest thing this impacts is actually that first cast. That'll nerf that first bite usually pretty well. Even in a Whispers comp where he's stacked up a little bit. But this should make that a little bit. So again, all 3 of these dragons should be brought down just a little bit. Still good, maybe not quite as dominant as they have been.
And overall, the theme here is less durability, so that you can your other carries in the game, whether they're reroll or they're some other 4-cost non-dragon or 5-cost non-dragon, can break through them and actually kill them, rather than have these gigantic monstrosities that are literally unkillable. Well, not literally unkillable, but they're just too tanky right now. We're bringing that down a little bit, and that should hopefully open up carry diversity in this patch.
Yep. Pike, mostly buffing Pike 1. Pike 1's just never a champion we see people like, oh, sweet, Pike 1, I want to put it in my comp. So giving him a little bit of a buff. Smaller buff at Pike 2 as well. But again, a lot of people are much more excited about things like Bard, Yasuo, but not really Pike. And so hopefully trying to get Pike up to that level where you're like, sweet, a Pike.
Yep, I think covered Pike.
Cool. And then Yasuo, probably the most flexible 5-cost in the game. Can be played, barely cares about his traits. You can play him in Mirage, you can play him in whatever, play him in Jade. Has 1100 health, which is kind of ridiculous. Constantly shields himself, does AoE damage, does AoE CC, and wins every final fight. So just a little too good all around. And we want him good, don't get me wrong, but we're bringing him down just a bit. So a little less health, a little less damage, unless you're going to itemize him. So should make him, I think he'll still be good. I think people are still going to run blue buff Yasuo 2s for the CC, the tankiness. But again, just a little less good.
Yeah, with the HP nerf, Cavalier Yasuo gets a EHP hit, so he'll be less tanky, but he'll still be tanky, and it's still going to be a really good item on him. The spell 80% nerf is a lot smaller, and you won't notice that too much. But overall, he's dishing out too much damage, is also tanky and stalls for a while, so he needs to be brought down a little.
Cool. All right, on the item side, Static Shiv has been overperforming a little bit, especially in the early game. You get an early Static Shiv with or without the gadget augment. These items are insane. So bringing those down just a little bit, nerfing their damage. And then Zerat Portal has been another item that took a long time for people to realize just how good it is, but now that they have, is performing really, really well. And so glad we figured that out. But we're bringing it down just a little bit. And then Radiant Zerat, if you ever got a Radiant Zerat at 2-1, I don't think you realized quite how insane that was. So bringing that down hopefully a little bit here.
Yeah, Radiant Zerat on 2-1 is so good. But even Zerat, regular Zerat, early on is really good. And so by people are finally catching on, especially I think in China. And so bringing these down so that they're more reasonable. There'll still be good slams, not huge nerfs, but they're just too good. And Static Shiv has just been popular the entire set, does a lot of damage, also keeps the shred on the entire team basically as your unit is shredding them over and over. But we wanted to focus on keeping that shred identity for the late game. The damage kind of falls off, but Shiv gives you the tempo to get there. We want to nerf that tempo without nerfing the identity of the item, where it helps give your magic users something to shred the enemies with. Yep. But still, the item should still be a good tempo slam, just not the way it is now.
Yep. All right, augment list. I'm just going to power through these, and then Kent, you can go over any key ones. Yep. All right, Axiom Arc 1 and 2 have been underperforming a bit. We're going to try to give them a little bit of a buff here. Now that most of the bugs have been kinked out, there still should be cases where it's sweet, if I get some kills, I can chain cast. Lee Sin, as an example, should be fun. Best Friends 2 and 3 still overperforming, so they're going to lose quite a bit of their attack speed, actually. They won't be quite as dominant. Every cybernetic augment, this is all 3 variations at all 3 levels, are losing health. These augments are really, really, really good for how universal they are, and so those are going to get a bit of a nerf. Hot Shot overperforming, that's going to get a pretty big nerf here, losing 2% of the true damage there. Late Game Specialist is going to get 5 more gold, a little bit of a buff. If you're willing to go that Soju Special Fast 9, go for it. Personal Training never really worked out as like an augment that people were excited about, so we're going to buff that up as well. So again, 8 Bruiser with Personal Training, that's your new goal. See how big a health pools you can get to. Press the Attack, especially with Xayah getting, the buffs. I think Xayah with the right augments, we're going to be a little too good. And so we're going to nerf Press the Attack preemptively. Rich Get Richer Plus, not nearly good enough, so just giving it a little bit more gold so that maybe you want that 18 gold at 3-2. Scorch literally enables like the set builds. That augment is still insane. I think this augment still got away with a light nerf, but again, with Set, Xayah, and Shyvana, gonna nerf that down a bit. Weak Spot has been generally just a really good augment, and we're kind of fine with its power level. It's not overperforming, but the thing we're gonna take away from it is just the utility a little bit. It won't keep the anti-heal on for quite as long. So maybe if you're able to kill the enemy, you can get that anti-heal to fall off. Should be just a very slight nerf. We're going to see what that does. And then finally, Windfall. I hate that we have to do this, but we're going to try it. We're going to buff Windfall at all levels. I think this is going to make Windfall 1 hopefully appealing. But right now, they're all underperforming. No one's really excited to take it outside of China. So we'll see if more people are willing to take the Windfall.
Yeah, cybernetics, one thing to talk about here is like, we're nerfing the health that it grants your team. We've like started to realize how much like every little bit of health matters, and cybernetics really just buff up your team a lot in terms of like survivability. And so we're taking a big swing here where we basically nerf everything across the board. It's only 50 health at 2 and 3, which is like not a lot, but it doesn't sound like a lot, but we think it should make a difference. Every 50 health actually like is significant. For Windfall, like it's a weak augment right now. You're never excited about seeing this on 2-1. At 25 gold, you still won't be like that excited to see it, but like it is a little bit more tempting. We don't want Windfall to be like, oh my god, I definitely always want to take Windfall, but it should be like, this is a pretty good fallback option, and I need gold right now. This is good. I should take this, and I'm playing for this strategy, and it should enable it. And so it's a little too weak. We want that to continue to being the niche that it fulfills, and so we're giving it a bigger buff at 2-1 and smaller buffs. Like it's 5 gold throughout, but percentage-wise, it's a lot more when the starting gold is 20.
Cool. On the small changes side, nothing too crazy here. The first one is actually a UX change. We've changed how guild is displayed in the trait tracker. If we ever decide to do more traits like this will be handy. But basically, having guild take up the entire space like this was really just too much. And so this shrinks it down a bit. Should be pretty nice. And then Scale Score in 6, it's a chase trait. It's meant to be very, very powerful. We want it powerful. It requires 2 emblems or augments, but maybe not that powerful. So just bringing it down just a little bit.
Yeah, the guild thing, makes it so that it's a lot clearer. It doesn't just go into the middle of your board where you will see the number. So this is a really cool change. Nothing to add on Scale Score.
Cool. On the champ side, Yone 2 overperforming just a teeny tiny bit. And so like this is literally the tiniest nerf we could give him. Just 10 damage off the magic damage part at 2 and 3. So again, if that, because like we've seen Yone 2 can really dominate the early game, and so just again, very light nerf. We don't expect to do much here. Elise getting a buff at 1 and 2 star. We do want Elise to be a carry you can consider, and so getting her to do a little bit more damage is going to be good. And then Sona 2 is another champion that hasn't just really worked out as like someone you're really excited to itemize. So Sona 2 gets a bit of a small damage buff here.
Yep, nothing to add on this slide.
Cool. Ao Shen 2 overperforming just a little bit, and so just really tiny nerf here. Honestly, you should barely notice it, but it's just very tiny. And then Shyvana, we talked about it in the patch post-mortem, but having to have 4 autos before that first cast was really painful. So we're going to give her 1 auto back. If you want to put blue buff on Shyvana, this will mean you instant cast. If you want to go Hodge Archangel, it's 1 auto, but this should just be a slight nudge to Shyvana to put her right back where we wanted her.
Yep. Alshin, we gave him a small buff at 1 star last patch. We were really happy about that change. It made it so that you can actually stabilize off of Alshin 1 later in the game, and then try to work your way to Alshin 2, but it wasn't like auto win or anything like that. Alshin 2 just became way too strong since you could get to him. This change won't change too much, but in the cases where he's healing or like facing tanks or like a lot of enemies left, he won't wipe them out just as easily or heal up just as much, and so that should make it so that you can actually like counterplay him and try to beat him. For Shyvana, that we talked about this quite a lot in the past postmortem actually, but basically like it was way too hard to get her in the cast. Her and Hecarim kind of share the same trait where they have to like walk up, auto attack 4 times, but there's so much CC later in the game, they don't have that high of attack speeds that they just like sometimes don't even get 4 attacks off. And so making it so that she only needs 3 will make her more reliable and a successful carry.
Cool. Again, on the item side, so we did a bunch of item adjustments here that are all very, very small, but just trying to adjust these items a little bit here. So Ionic Spark loses a little bit of its spark damage, goes from 200% to 185% of the enemy's mana cost. Sunfire Cape loses 50 HP. Rocket Propelled Fist loses another 50 HP. Draven's Axe loses 1 gold on cash out, so it'll now be 7 gold plus an item component. We like the item component, we're not taking that away. Just a little bit. This should put all the Shimmer Scale items pretty balanced now. Radiant Archangel Staff starts with 40 AP instead of 30. Radiant Deathblade gets 5, 10, 15 more AD. Radiant Giant Slayer gets a bit of a buff where the small threshold is a little higher, and then the HP threshold to get the large is a little easier to hit. Rabadon's Death Cap Radiant gets another 5 AP, and Radiant Spear of Shojin gets another 10 AP. So again, a lot of micro adjustments to items to try to get them a little closer to each other.
Yeah, nothing much to add here. Just glad we're going through the Radiant items, opening up the number of options you can have when you pick Radiant Relics. It's a really fun augment. Now there's a lot more viable things that will be strong.
Yep. And then we get to the long list of tooltip and bug fixes. I have to read all these. All right, here I go. Hextech Gunblade now specifies that it heals the lowest health percent ally. It always did. Now the tooltip says it does. Zaya, Corki, and Talon now have their 80% in their tooltips. Just trying to clear that up a bit. Zanya's Hourglass now specifies that the holder is untargetable when the status effect is triggered. So again, just clarifying how it already worked. Siphon's tooltip now correctly specifies a 2.5 hex dash range. Fixed a hyper roll bug where players hit level 8 and level 9 1 round later than intended. Cool. Fixed a bug where some missions didn't progress in hyper roll and double up. Cool. Shen dodge zone displays properly at all star levels. Cool. Lilia's second cast now hits her target even if she dashes. This should be a pretty big buff to Lilia, actually. Lilia Mage should now not miss nearly as much, so be aware of that one. Shyvana will now move into range if there are no targets within range when casting Flame Breath. A little bit of a Shyvana quality of life there. Kiana will now move into range if there are no targets within range of casting. Same thing. Shioyu's third attack knockup will now trigger at the target's location if the target is out of Shioyu's base attack range. Basically what these are all trying to say is if you want to run triple RFC Shioyu, it will now work. Cool. That's really what this is trying to say. Volibear's Chain Lightning should no longer appear to chain off the board. It was just visual. It never actually hit other people, but certainly scared people. Fixed an issue where the overtime VFX would sometimes to continue a play on a player's screen after a PvE round. Woohoo! Zoe will no longer give armor and MR from Kale's intervention to the same unit multiple times from a single cast if her total targets she's trying to cast on is greater than her total living allies. Pretty niche case, but glad we fixed the bug. Ragewing champions no longer gain range when equipped with a mana item while they are enraged. Really small mana thing you could do. And then Runon's Hurricane no longer deals Scalescorn's bonus magic damage. Scalescorn is not meant to interact with item damage. It doesn't interact with Shiv. Shouldn't interact with Hurricane. So there you go.
Yep. Nothing to add here, but a funny story to share about the Ragewing thing was I was working on a fix for this, and my initial fix that I tried actually reintroduced the mana bug to anybody who like has played set 3 and before. There was a mana bug where if you put a tier on a unit, then you build the item, the tier item, like Frozen Heart, for example, afterwards, they would gain that 15 mana, then an extra 30 mana. And so reintroduce that in our internal builds. And I had to like quickly go back and fix it. And I mean, it won't work like that anymore, but it was just funny because it's like, holy crap, I reintroduced the mana bug. And then Witty made a meme of the thing of where you like wear the clown hat or like, you know, the clown costume thing. It's like,
so,
you know,
you should just tweet out that meme on Sunday.
Okay.
Because this video goes live Sunday at noon. You should just tweet it out, and that way everyone can see the meme that you're talking about.
Yes. Witty's wonderful meme.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, cool. All right, and that's it. We're done with the first half of Dragonlands. On to the second half.
Yes. Soon you will all get to see what we've been cooking up on PvE, all the exciting changes. Mort and I have been having fun in our playtests. We hope you guys will enjoy it too.
Also been doing a lot of work.
Yep.
Okay, so I was gonna say we should talk about like what was our highlight and low light of Dragonlands, but I'm gonna skip the low light because we can both probably just say 12-14 and call it a day. What was the highlight for you?
Ooh, okay. Well, as I think every time we do this, I'm like, you go first because you've already been thinking about this. And then
I haven't been thinking. I literally just made up the question.
Oh, I know my highlight. My highlight was 9 Dragonmancer Shyvana with like 15k health and dealing like 2k damage per flame breath tick. Before we reworked Shyvana, I was like addicted to playing Lee Sin carry into Shyvana carry, finding that emblem every single game and trying to make that work. It was a lot. That patch was just a lot of fun. I lost a lot of LP, gained a little bit, had those highlights. I really liked that patch.
I think for me, a lot of the highlights came down to like the wild and crazy 3-star versus 3-star 5 cost versus 3-star 5 costs you would get into. Like the one I'll remember is like I was up against a Bard, but this was before we'd reworked Pike, but I had the Pike 3 with a Quicksilver. And so because I had the Quicksilver, I was able to beat the Pike 3 or the Bard 3, and it was like, yeah. And so you get these like epic duels of like whose 3-star 5 cost is going to win. Now keep in mind, Soraka just wins all those duels anyway, but other than Soraka, they're pretty epic.
That is fun. It's also like we've seen that on streams, on tournaments, things like that. So those are always fun to watch.
Yep. Cool. All right, well, that's going to do it for first half of Dragonlands. It's Sunday around noonish. You're probably watching this, so not long now until the floodgates open and you find out about the mid-set expansion. So, cool. All right, that's going to do it for us. For those of you that will be playing on live, enjoy the last patch. For those of you playing on PB,
enjoy AD Braum. Enjoy AD Braum.
Oh, God. All right, that's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.
See ya.